So good morning, everyone. This is our second work group meeting of the Santa Barbara Design Standards project. I think I'll just start with a quick roll call. Could I have all the work group members maybe turn on their cameras? Just see who's here. Hi, so it looks like we have David Black, Cass Ensberg, Robert Uli, Richard Six, and we would still be waiting for Detty Pikart, and I believe Gabriel Escobedo is coming, and I think Dennis Storden said he couldn't make it. But given the time, I think we'll just go ahead and start. Tony, do you want to go ahead and put your slides on the screen?
Yeah, give me a second to do that in transition here.
And work group members, if you want, while we're doing the presentation, you can go ahead and turn your cameras and microphones off. Of course, if you have questions, during the presentation, you can pop on. Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide, Tony? So I'm going to go ahead and just do the first few slides in this presentation, and then I'll be handing it over to our team at Opticos. And so as you can see on the agenda, we're going to just summarize what's happened since the last work group meeting. And then Opticos will go ahead and present the meeting overview, research and analysis. We'll talk about the next work group meeting. And then at the end, we'll reserve a little time for public comment. Next slide. So I just wanted to let everybody know what has been happening since we last met. And I think you all knew we were planning this site tour. So Opticos team came and met with city staff. And prior to the meeting, we had looked at all the areas that we thought would be, and project sites that would be great for Opticos to view, and did this great map, thanks to Timmy Bolton, and had a bunch of site stops. I think it was almost 20 or 30 stops along the way. And they got a good overview of the city. And then in the afternoon, we sat down and had meetings with chairs of the Historic Landmarks Commission, Architectural Board of Review, and city staff. So it was a really action-packed visit. Beautiful day actually for it, and I think everybody got a lot out of it. Next slide. Oh, and also I just wanted to mention, I think as a follow-up afterwards, I sent you all the map and the locations where we stopped. So if you wanted to do your own mini site tour, that was available. Following that, then Opticos conducted focus group interviews, which were groups of 2 to 3 people, sometimes just one person, where we sat down and talked to them about their concerns, questions, input on the whole concept of design standards. And so we did outreach to affordable housing advocates, applicant architects, community members, developers, historic resource advocates, and landscape architects. And coming out of those focus group interviews, and I was there too, I just kind of sat in and listened. We heard from folks that there's tends to be community opposition to development for various different housing projects, and that can be an issue. They brought up concerns with delays when projects go through design review boards and the whole process. Issues with the scale and size of new building massing compared to what's going on adjacent to them. just general concerns about architectural styles and designs. And we talked about zoning envelopes and what's allowed versus what's achievable once a project goes through multiple review hearings. And then we heard about concerns about just neighborhoods changing and the context and character. So we kind of heard different input on, depending on who we talk to, whether the process is going really well or not, or whether there's concerns that the city is changing too fast. And next slide. With that, I think we'll go into Opticos's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Rosie, and thanks everybody for attending today and for your time this morning. Sorry, I don't know why this is doing that, but the information that we want to share with you today and talk with you about is basically about assessing the existing physical character, and we'll break that down in a number of sections and topics. But it's, in order to really start to advise the city and all of you on how to prepare the objective standards in the best way for all the needs in Santa Barbara. We have to start with the existing physical character, and you'll see why more in this presentation. But that's a big part of what we've been doing. You all know your town, way better than we ever will. But we've taken it apart in a way that starts to look at the elements in ways that maybe you all have thought about, but your standards don't currently talk about necessarily, or you talk about all these topics in your design review processes, but maybe they're not all part of the process explicitly. And so we have just documented all that and are ready to share that with you today, along with observations about that physical character and what makes it in different neighborhoods and what makes it distinctive from one neighborhood to the other, and vice versa. What shared characteristics are there among the different neighborhoods that need to be taken into account? And then we're going to use all this information for the next step to prepare an approach, a recommended approach for how to go about preparing these objective standards. And so with that, we have 4 key questions for you today, and we're hoping for a lot of input. I mentioned we're going to get from this group a lot of input and ideas about these topics. And so these 4 questions, we just want you to keep in mind as we go through all this content today in this presentation. Certainly there are other questions, but if we're pressed to raise the top 4 right now, it's these. So as you hear this information, keep in mind, what prevalent patterns are present that are desirable and not necessarily regulated under the current zoning. For example, elements like frontage types, say, the porches, the stoops, say terraces, the way that entries meet the street, all those beautiful design outcomes that you achieve. Some of those are and are not regulated as building footprint. Same thing. You achieve great results, but not all of that is in zoning. And so, which of those are present desirable and that you would like to you'd like to regulate that aren't currently regulated? And then right sizing buildings. What issues are present regarding zone transitions, historic resource adjacencies that are desirable but are not necessarily regulated under current zoning? And there are some examples there. And then architectural styles, which of those styles should be allowed and where and what about each style is desirable to regulate? And then lastly, historic transitions. What issues are present regarding compatibility with adjacent historic resources that are not necessarily regulated under current zoning? So again, a lot of what we are charged with doing is obviously preparing these objective standards, but in order to do that, we want to identify which of those topics need to be regulated, which don't need to be regulated, and then of the ones that need to be regulated, to what degree should they be regulated, and is that geographic, and is it topical? So these are the kinds of things we'd like to discuss with you today. So let's start with just confirming the project area. Project area is basically anywhere in the city where 3 or more units are allowed. by the zoning. And so it's essentially the upper state area, and then most of downtown, the west side, Laguna area, or a portion of the east side, the Milpas corridor, a lower state, a very small portion of the east and west Mesa areas, and then Coast Village Road. So our analysis is going to be presented today in two main areas, main topics. And the first one we're going to talk about is the neighborhood physical character, including existing zoning. So what makes the character, the physical character right now in all the different neighborhoods, the 19 neighborhoods that we've looked at across the city where this applies. And then secondly, my colleague Eric Burnaby is going to present the architectural style information. So neighborhood characteristics that we found across these 19 neighborhoods, and I just want to make something clear here from the outset. Let me go back to this map. You know, take for example the West Side neighborhood there in the middle of the screen. The portion of the West Side neighborhood, a portion of all these neighborhoods that is in the project area, when we're referring to neighborhoods today in the physical characteristics, we are talking about the areas of the project that are inside the neighborhood, not necessarily the entire neighborhood. And then my colleague Eric, who's going to talk about the architectural style, that analysis has looked at the entire neighborhoods. So I just want to clarify that. So of the neighborhood characteristics, we organized them into basically four general topics. The first is about the context and whether it's walkable, you know, is it a walkable pattern or is it auto-oriented? Is the topography generally flat or is it one of the sloped areas in town? And then what kind of zones exist in that neighborhood? Streetscape, and the elements that make the streetscape, the lots, their dimensions and the parking type and location, and then buildings. And you can see there's a lot of information in front of the topic of buildings or before it, because in addition to the buildings themselves, there are a lot of other elements that make up lots and blocks and neighborhoods and all the type of environment that people enjoy in Santa Barbara. So let's talk about the first one. This is a summary. We're going to be presenting you the summary of all this information, which will then be put into a document later this year into a memo summarizing all this information. But the first summary here is the general. So on the left, you'll see the context type, walkable or auto-oriented, and then the topography. So we found you know, either flat, less than 6% slope, or between 6 and 15%. And then the different zones. And you see there at the top, it says prevalent zones. So what we're trying to show here are patterns. And you can see that the RM zone occurs most in all of these neighborhoods. Well, it's the most prevalent zone across the project area. In each of the neighborhoods, you can read left to right across here. You can see which of the prevalent zones are in each of those neighborhoods. So, for example, on the east side, about 5th or 6th from the top of the list there, you can see the RM zone is prevalent, and there is some RMH. Let's take Laguna. You can see there are a couple lower than that, but the RM zone is prevalent, and there's some occurrences of the CG zone and a few occurrences of the OR, and so on. And so you can look at this at your leisure after this meeting, or we can come back to it. But that's how this information is being presented today. What is common, what is less common, and what is it occurs in a neighborhood, but it is not a strong pattern. The streetscapes are, you know, they're so important, and sometimes the building next to the streetscape is so good that maybe a mediocre streetscape can still be positively perceived because of the great building next to it. But often the streetscape can make buildings even better. So what we found that makes the streetscape are these topics, frontage types, and you can see there we found shop fronts, terraces, porches, and stoops. In some cases, parking lots in front. Other cases, a gallery or an arcade. And in other cases, nothing, where it's undefined, there isn't really a type, it's just a facade with a setback. And then the landscaping on the private side of the line between the public right of way and the property, and you can see all the different types of landscaping situations there, front yards on the left, all the way to parking lots and screening on the right, and then landscaping in the public realm. So on the right of way side of that line going into the center of the street, what's happening on the planter and the sidewalk, what kind of planter is it, and then lastly on the right there, what kinds of sidewalks are there and what are their widths. And you might say, well, we know this, we live here, but if you have to start to talk about what is important in making standards, we found it very important to understand, well, what is making the physical character the way that people really like it right now? Or it reveals areas where you might say, well, yeah, now that we look at it this way, we might want to emphasize this element more or require more on a particular element in these standards. And then the third of these four topics is the lot dimensions and the number of units per lot in the parking situation. So on the left there, you see the size of the lots, and it's clear that the 50 by 100 is prevalent in most of the neighborhoods, and then the next prevalent size is 50 by 150. And obviously there are many other sizes, smaller and larger, but these are the prevalent lot sizes. And what we found important in understanding this is that when you write standards, you want to write them for the majority of the lot sizes and lot widths and lot depths that you find, and then that helps you understand how to adjust those standards for those outliers, both small and large. And then understanding how lots are used, so the number of units per lot right now, and you can see that the majority in these neighborhoods is the 1 to 2, and then there are many occurrences of the 3 to 6 and the 7 to 16, and then just one of the 19 to 24. So starting to tell us how intensely these properties are used, and that points us to maybe decisions about what kinds of buildings to consider in certain contexts that maybe haven't been considered, or to continue that pattern that's already there. The parking type, what kind of parking approach is being used on these lots, and in most of the situations that we found, it was a surface parking approach. And then its location. You can see that the majority of the parking locations are in the rear and side, but there are several occurrences of it being in the front. And then lastly, buildings. So this is the part that most people focus on, is the buildings, but we find that understanding the other three before it are super important to then put the buildings in context. So now at this scale, we're looking at the number of buildings per lot, but also the building types in those areas. So now we can see, like, say, let's take Laguna again. Laguna has quite a lot of things going on in it. It has primarily one building per lot, although there are some occurrences of more. And then it has all kinds of different building types you can see there. There's not a prevalent one that we observe. There's just many different types that are happening in that particular neighborhood. And then you can see the building scale. If you read across Laguna there, the prevalence of the scale there is house scale. And I'm going to talk about house scale and block scale in the next slide, because it's a key aspect of our work and how we think about building size and scale. And then lastly there, you can see building height, either 1 to 2 or 3 or more. So let's talk about building scale a little bit here. This is a concept that I learned from the architect Stefanos Balzoitis when I was working with him almost 20 years ago. And he made this observation about, although there are many different types of buildings that we can all agree that there are many types. We were just showing you several on the previous slide. When you look at them all, it's really helpful to sort them into two categories. And the two categories are shown in this aerial of Healdsburg, California. On the left are what we call block scale buildings. They're buildings that are individually or collectively formed to form what is all or most of all of a block. The house scale category is, as its name suggests, they are the size of houses, small to large, and they are detached from one another. And regardless of their use, you can see here in the purple or fuchsia, however it's coming out on your screen, whether it's a school or a church or a library or a residential use in those house scale buildings, they are the size of houses, small to large. And you know, in some communities, they think that because many of those buildings tend to have a pitched roof, that they are house scale. That obviously doesn't make it house scale. It's the footprint of those buildings, small to large, and that's definable in every community. But there is a footprint that you can define there, and then they are detached and they are of a different size and scale than the block scale buildings. So that's a key aspect of how we're looking at things, and just wanted to communicate that to you. So the next part of our analysis is looking at the existing zoning and comparing that with approved projects. And we looked at 24 of the projects that staff shared with us. Actually, we looked at a few more, but most of these were on the tour that we took in September, and we selected 5 for this analysis. And what we did was we looked at the zoning envelope and then compared it with the project. And here are those 5 sites. So 3869 State Street, Grace Village, Westmont Housing over in Oak Park neighborhood, a project in San Andres Street, and then a project in Rancheria and a Campus Streets, or Casa Natega it's called. So we're going to go through those here. And the first one is this Grace Village up on 3869 State Street. And the first of 2 slides I'm going to show for each of these. This one identifies the maximum zoning envelope, and you can see here on the left-hand side, it's just the setbacks and the maximum height applied, and then it's extruded to show the maximum zoning envelope or volume where the building can occur. And this doesn't have the open yard requirement applied to it yet. Now the one on the right takes that same envelope and reduces it by applying the open yard. And we're just showing this diagrammatically. We understand that open yard could be distributed. It could happen 36 inches above the ground and all those kind of variations. But because there's so many different ways you could show that, we just chose to show it diagrammatically here as a portion of the lot, and then what it represents in terms of an aggregate area that would be subtracted from the building. And then you take that same project and now we compare it, the maximum zoning envelope shown in gray with the actual approved project shown in the black outline. And you can see here that of the 45 foot tall zoning envelope, the building used 38 feet of that, with the exception of there in the center, it's a little taller. So it made pretty efficient use of the zoning envelope. The next one is the Oak Park Lane project, the Westmont Housing. So here's the same analysis with the zoning envelope extruded, with the setbacks applied, and without the open yard on the left. And then on the right, that same envelope now with the open yard shown in one corner, just again diagrammatically. And then we're looking at the maximum zoning envelope here, which is 45 feet, and then the actual project, which came in at 34 feet at the highest portions of these buildings. And it's a very nice project. It fits nicely in the context, but it also shows there were 11 more feet of zoning envelope that could have been applied to this project. And, you know, looking at that neighborhood, it's easy to say that, well, those 11 additional feet really wouldn't make that building fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. And so just something to keep in mind between the amount of zoning envelope in these different areas and the actual projects that were approved, representing what really fits and was acceptable to everyone. The third one introduces something new here. It talks about the solar access requirements. You can see there in red. So on the left, that same exercise of extruding the building to its maximum allowed height, and then the setbacks applied to show the maximum zoning envelope. But now on the right, we are applying the solar access limitation there, or requirements, and showing that in red what that represents in terms of cutting out of the maximum building envelope. In addition here, on this site, there's a designated creek and wetland habitat sensitivity area in the rear. And we didn't show it graphically because, that requires a study, and you need to see what the results of the study are in order to then show that or reflect that on the maximum zoning envelope. So we just wanted to note it, that it applies here. So the same analysis here of the maximum zoning envelope of 45 feet allowed by the RM zone, and then the resulting building heights and shapes contrasted with that. And you can see that the approved project ranges somewhere between 25 feet and 35 feet. One of the buildings is 35 feet tall, but it's really interesting. It's a great project. The buildings feel really good. We walk through there. The spaces, just the distance between them, it feels very nice. But the zoning envelope here suggests something different than what the actual project came out to be, which is a very nice project. And then here, this example on Rancheria Street, again, this is an example where the solar access requirement applies, and you can see the maximum zoning envelope on the left, and then that solar requirement identified on the one on the right. And this particular example has a sensitivity area in the rear of the lot regarding a designated city landmark. And again, because that wasn't something that we could measure and subtract from the building maximum zoning envelope here, we just simply noted it and acknowledged that it applies here. And again, the same analysis here with the maximum zoning envelope in height of 45 here in the RMH zone, and the resulting project ranging from basically a little over 22 feet to 23 feet, and then much space in between where the parking occurs. And you can see here, one of the things that we noticed is that the context, again, going back to that idea of house scale and block scale, the context here is very much house scale, but the zoning envelope would suggest something much larger than house scale. But the project that came out fits, and it fits nicely. Here, the last example on Anacapa Street, Casa Anatega, again, maximum zoning envelope on the left without the open yard, and then the open yard applied. Here we showed it just for a different way to look at it. We showed it on one of the upper floors, because in this situation, the zoning allows it on upper floors. And so we're showing it here on the next to last floor. And this project actually has a podium courtyard, so it really fits that scenario. And then lastly, the maximum zoning envelope of 45 feet here in the MC zone, with a potential of 60 feet for a community building, but 45 feet applied here. And then the project came in at a pretty steady 38 feet, using most of that zoning envelope. But again, just noting that there are 7 more feet in that zoning envelope that were not used. And then here in this context, again, looking back to that house scale, block scale idea, it's mostly a block scale context, but across the street, on the side street, I'm forgetting the name right now, where the Paradise Cafe used to be, but that side street, perpendicular to Anacapa, has a few houses on it. And so there's some house scale pattern present on that, I guess, north of this project. So with that, I'm going to pause here and ask my colleague Eric Burnaby to talk about architectural style to you, and then we'll be done with the presentation and look forward to your discussion.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks for driving the PowerPoint. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to walk you through our approach to cataloging existing architectural styles, and I'll do it with these 4 topics that kind of describe the process so far, and that includes a neighborhood atlas, a series of tables that are styled by building form, styled by footprint, and styled by neighborhood, and then a diagram we're currently calling the donut diagram that kind of represents a potential approach to regulate objective architectural standards. And then lastly, just for reference, a series of images that show design guidelines we've worked on before or previously for other jurisdictions. Next slide, Tony. And so this is just an overview of the neighborhood atlas. At the end of the PowerPoint are each individual sheet. But this provides a summary of building form and styles, and then a list of those observed styles. And while it's not comprehensive, these images highlight prominent style examples, as well as some elements that in the past we were able to either define objectively to design, or that we think can inspire refinement in work we've done before, moving forward in objective design standards for architecture. Next slide, Tony. And based off the work we did for the neighborhood atlas, for all 19 neighborhoods, I believe, we've summarized our findings in 3 tables, and I'll walk you through kind of the X and Y of each. They're in a similar format to the tables Tony had shown before. So this first one is styled by building form. And so in the top 2 rows, we've consolidated similar styles into groups. Style group 1 includes Italianate, Craftsman, and American Colonial Revival. Style group 2 is kind of your Spanish Revival family, and it includes Adobe Mission Revival and Italian Mediterranean. Style group 3 kind of stands alone with English Vernacular / Tudor style. And these first 3 groups are styles that exist within the Historic Resources Guidelines for Santa Barbara. And then the 4th style group includes Contemporary and Industrial, which aren't included in those design guidelines. And so below is kind of just another way to think about the different house and block scales that Tony described earlier. And these pictures are examples in Santa Barbara, and you can see it moves from house scale small at the cottage size through block scale, and there are 2 examples from State Street. And so on the left, those of the table, we've created 3 rows for house scale small, medium, house scale large, and then block scale. And so what we were seeing is that for all the house scale, a lot of the styles are represented throughout that size range. But when you move into block scale, what you're more likely to find is style group 2 buildings. Tony, next slide. Thanks. So this is the table for style by footprint, and it's for house scale small and medium buildings in particular. And footprints help with our understanding of the main body and the wings of a building in terms of the placement and proportion and dimensions of the body and the wing. And so here we've just cataloged the occurrence of those different footprints for the different styles relative to house scale small and medium. Tony, next slide. And this last one is, it's my favorite table just because I'm not from Santa Barbara, so it's very interesting to see how there are actually a broad range of styles in Santa Barbara. So the big picture summary is that regardless of architectural quality, many styles occur consistently or fairly consistently throughout the city. But secondly, along State Street, around downtown, and sprinkled throughout the other neighborhoods are outlier examples. And so to the right, we've provided an example of a common versus outlier occurrence, just to clarify the distinction. And so while that, it tends to be clearer in the Spanish Revival family shown here, it also occurs in the other styles, but maybe less clear. So an example of that would be looking at a English vernacular building versus a Tudor versus a storybook, where if we're observing these different styles or riff on that style, we may not want to codify a particular storybook element, let's say the roof, from this building, from a building, but then looking at that same building, the openings and windows might be just fine and fit more into the English vernacular mold versus the outlier that would be storybook. Another distinction related to that is that the prevalence of these outliers may occur more often in particular neighborhoods. And from the table, you can see that's the case for downtown, which is the second row, and let's see, lower state. So, I mean, that's kind of to be expected, I feel. Whereas like you may be less likely to see the occurrence in, let's say, like West Downtown even, which is just adjacent to downtown. Next slide, Tony. And so this is the donut diagram. Again, it represents like a potential approach to regulating objective architectural standards. And so there's, in this donut diagram, there's the donut and the donut hole. And the donut hole is the dark orange, the EPV district. And then the donut is the area around, the lighter orange. Which is more so just the project area, that's not the EPV. And so in the donut hole, you tend to get buildings at a house scale large up to block scale. And for a lot of those buildings, they tend to fall into style group 2, which is the Spanish colonial revival kind of group. And so we might want to consider just limiting the range of architectural styles allowed so that we can get a desired outcome, versus the donut where we see a broader range of styles, just to say that those broader ranges at different scales are allowed. Tony, last set of slides. So these are the design guideline reference sheets I was talking about earlier. And these are just past guidelines we've helped produce that could help inform new styles not currently in the historic resources guidelines. And so that could include industrial and contemporary, but also if you're looking to new styles such as farmhouse or cottage, we might have examples to draw from to riff and modify to accommodate what that style wants to be for your community. And so the elements in these sheets include like massing and composition, and then like information about down to like detailed elements, so like doors and windows and cornices and eaves in a dimensional sense. Yeah, and so this kind of just summarizes our approach thus far in terms of cataloging and analyzing architectural styles for Santa Barbara.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, thank you, Eric. So one more slide here, and then we'll turn off the slides and start talking with you or hear from you. All this is going into a summary memo that just basically posts all these observations with a little narrative and notes it as the existing condition in the project area. And that memo is right now scheduled to be published in mid-January, late January. So with that, I will turn it back to staff.
Great, thanks for that presentation. So I'm sure after seeing all that, I'm hoping the work group has comments and questions. And Tony, I think if you put the slide up about the things we wanted them to think about, that might be really good. And we have about, I'd give us at least a half hour or a little bit more to discuss all these things. And then we want to make sure we save a little time for public comment, and you know, we'll go over our next meeting as well, but we can open it up now for about a half hour of comments or questions about any of these slides or the key questions we're wanting to get from you input on. So Richard, do you have something since your camera's on? Do you want to start?
Certainly. Just a couple questions on the presentation we just experienced. Thank you very much. A great presentation. I think I was confused with the discussion or the slide on the outer donut and the donut hole. Are the design standards we're creating for the donut only, and we're not even touching the El Pueblo Viejo? Or I thought it was for all areas of the city.
Yeah, I can clarify that, and I think we need to make it clear that the donut hole, as you know, and per our city ordinances and charter, is only allows certain architectural styles. So we're not going to touch that. But I think you know, our charge is to create design standards for those styles. So we'll still be working on those. It's just the allowed architectural styles we will not be changing for that area. Does that clear it?
Understand. So when this effort creates a design standards for the Spanish colonial or Hispanic architecture, El Pueblo Viejo projects will refer to that document?
Correct. And I should also clarify, because I know it comes up sometimes, and as you know, there was an earlier effort, the Senate Bill 35 objective design standards, which are for the Spanish colonial revival style. And so we're still, as staff, and we need to meet with Opticos and talk about those some more and how those are going to integrate into this bigger project.
So is it anticipated that the streamline El Pueblo Viejo standards that were developed will be completely absorbed into this new document?
Yeah, we don't know yet. So we're still kind of figuring that out, and we'll let you know once we kind of had some discussions about how to integrate that and how these all work together. So, you know, Senate Bill 35 actually has a sunset date at some point as well. So we need to think about all that and figure it out.
Yeah, then our next basic question is, a lot of the material that was, you know, the previous products that Opticos has produced, beautiful stuff, speaks a lot about influencing or even creating zoning. I just don't understand yet the interface between this effort that we're doing will not influence at all existing zoning, or will there be some interface and some interweaving and change in some of the zoning, or that will be affected by this effort?
Yeah, I can answer that if you'd like, Rosie, or would you like to answer it first?
I'll say something first, and then you can answer it. So those are all great questions, and I believe when we did the RFP for this project and in our work scope for this project, we didn't go into this intending on changing zoning. You know, the city has its height standards, its setback standards. Those have all been worked out over many years. But we are open to some zoning amendments if it gets us to where we need to get for these moving forward. So I don't know if we can answer that question yet.
Because I can see some, you know, with some of the standards that Opticos put together on, you know, setting back buildings, and, you know, the third story is within the roof form, et cetera, on some of them. That could be a challenge to coordinate with the the zoning setbacks.
Yeah, you're correct, and that's why we're sort of open to exploring maybe some zoning amendments that go along with this, but I don't know at this point yet.
Okay, great.
Tony, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer the alternative that could happen is, instead of changing them outright, is to approach, because these are for a different type of project, right? So everything else could continue as it is, but for these types of project that request permit streamlining under the law, you could provide all these new standards in a supplemental standard approach that wouldn't change the base zoning. And so you would only apply those new supplemental standards instead of the others when those projects occurred. So you wouldn't have to sort out, well, which ones do I apply, which ones do I not apply?
Okay, then, great, thanks. Then the last question is compare, no, I won't go there. I was gonna joke that, comparing the zoning envelope versus the actual, we could just relax and go home, right? None of these projects, challenge the building, the zoning envelope, so.
Although what I wanted to point out
is that what that whole demonstration?
No, actually, thanks
take from that, or what do we take from that?
Yeah, no. Thanks for that question. It's not that we should relax and go home. Sorry for giving that impression. It's the opposite. It's that to show either how much of the zoning envelope those projects were achieving or how little of it they were achieving. And there's no message there from us right now. It's more an observation. It's just saying, in some cases, there was a lot of zoning envelope that wasn't used, but it was appropriate to make that call because that was a house scale condition on a context. And so that zoning envelope was actually too much for that kind of context. So that's another takeaway. The simply observations.
Yes, thank you.
any other work group members want to chime in? And you can go ahead and turn on your camera and microphone if you do.
Just one more. I'm sorry if I'm dominating here, but I think back on page 31, it was very interesting. Can we go back there?
Yeah.
With architectural styles, that it seemed that the downtown, I guess we're speaking of the donut hole, the downtown hardly had, was very, was this the one? I guess the Spanish style is spread throughout. Well, you would think that the Spanish style would be much more dominant than the rest of them. But I guess if you collected the medium-sized dots along the Spanish spectrum, they would add it to a lot more than the big-sized dots of the Craftsman and American Colonial Revival. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, Tony, do you want me to field this one? I feel like there might be a little more nuance to the graphic that we might want to consider for the table, in that if you are looking purely at the downtown row, style group 2 is very common, but it also has outlier. So it's like an also condition. So it's almost as if both dots want to be in there, or the graphic of the dot symbol wants to be reconsidered, so that it's clearer that it is common, but also that there are outlier versions. Thank you for noting that, Richard.
Okay, thanks. Just trying to help me understand what we got here.
And
Thank
also,
you.
I'm assuming downtown, it's not just State Street, right? It's kind of a couple of blocks
Ah,
Yeah, if you look at these neighborhood boundaries are defined in our city's general plan. And
yeah.
do you have a map that shows the neighborhood boundaries? I can't remember if that was in your presentation.
No, we don't.
Okay,
I mean,
but
not these slides. Yeah.
do you remember downtown, I think encompasses probably out to Chapala or beyond, maybe De La Vina to Santa Barbara Street or something like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where you get a lot more different styles in those outline areas. Yes, I understand. Thank you.
So anyone else want to? Cass, thank you. I knew Cass would want to say something.
This is, you know, a bit overwhelming, but I really thank you for the presentation and for, you know, trying to organize all the data so that we can kind of, you know, wrap our heads around it and sort of look at it maybe in a little bit different way. So I'm just going to throw out a bunch of different thoughts just to maybe help the discussion. Just things that came up for me, and these aren't in necessarily any very well organized thought pattern, so bear with me. But well, back to what Richard said, of course, we have the EPV, and that is the, you know, where we primarily have the, you know, it's the El Pueblo Viejo, our very special district, our historic district, the place where we have, you know, the Spanish colonial revival and a few other styles as well, but where we really want to keep that, in my opinion, unique. That, you know, I worry about, and we talked about this when we did the design standards for the, you know, the objective design standards that we did in the Spanish colonial revival style that we worked on, what, a year and a half ago. And what we were concerned about at that time is that since we were dealing with a schedule and we needed to be sure we got something in place, so we put that in place. What I would not want to see is that the unique quality and the special quality of the historic district becomes diluted by having that style sort of start getting everywhere, you know, in town. And so we talked about, you know, all the other neighborhoods and how unique they were. Like, you know, we always talk about the bungalow district, for example, or even, you know, the funk zone. So we talked about needing to have neighborhood plans for each one of those to really understand why those different neighborhoods were different, what made them different, and how we could accentuate and enhance their unique differentness. So so I appreciate, so that's something I just wanted to make that statement. Also, I appreciate the, what do you call the outlier, which to me was like, you know, this sort of artistic expression, as we see, and of course, Jeff Shelton's work. He seems to be kind of the unique guy in town that really has that over the top artistic expression that he's been able to somehow, you know, work through the system and really be able to express himself. I would hope that we could also embrace and help other of our incredibly pool of talented architects to also be that expressive in their own way. To really, you know, because I see Santa Barbara as a very, a city that's based on artistic expression. And I'd like to see more of that. So I'm a little bit worried that if we start making too much, you know, that we not make this so dictated, like this is this style, this is this style, this is this style, where it becomes a thing where you have to match that exact style. I just worry that in our attempts to create examples, that we then are restricted. So I just want to kind of point that out as, you know, let's have it, you know, where we don't, we want to encourage this creative expression within these styles And that, you know, I guess you could say, well, if you wanted to avoid a lot of design review and you wanted to just get through quickly, you might just match a, you know, make the perfect craftsman cottage. You've checked all the boxes and you're done. If you wanted to do something more creative and expressive, well, then maybe you're starting to get over the line, and now suddenly you have to go through a ton of, you know, design review, and suddenly you're in torture land. So, you know, how do we avoid that? And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that one of the things that over the years that's always bothered me is that everything in Santa Barbara is existing non-conforming. And why, you know, the reason is there was a newer, the code or the zoning that was in place when a lot of these wonderful old neighborhoods were created was changed. And a more modern zoning attitude was placed over it. And so now everything that we want to have is existing non-conforming. So I've always thought, well, why don't we just, you know, take that zoning away and make it back to the way it was before, if what we're trying to create is things that match things from the early part of the century, then why are we saying that they're existing non-conforming, and therefore now you have to get modifications and everything for everything? So that's something I wanted to point out. And then what was the last thing? Oh, yes. So the examples, it was very interesting to me, the examples of the zoning envelope and how almost none of the projects reached the full potential. They were all under, almost all. A couple of them came up pretty close. So, you know, I have to say now, why and how? Why didn't they get to the high? And how did that happen? So was it that they had to go through a lot of design review and they got beat down, and so then they came down and lower to actually meet the compatibility of the neighborhood? You know, how did it come to be that they're allowed to go this high, but they only went half as high? And so that question I asked, because is this a way, you know, why are we allowing that height if we don't want that height? If we want a lower height because it's in the west side or it's in the east side and it's a neighborhood where there really are just like two-story, and this is, this gets now off into the murky territory of FAR and all of that we've been talking about, and how high and how dense, and, you know, do we want the city to be? So, and that's sort of another, that's another thing, but of course it's all related. So I guess those are those, so I'm just throwing those out there. To for everybody to you know, add their comments and thoughts. But I appreciate very much this discussion, and appreciate the you know, the expertise of this analysis. And I'll stop there right now and then see where the discussion goes.
Thanks, Cass. That's all great observations. And yeah, I can't answer them all at this point, but it's something we're all thinking about for sure.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to hop on at this point? We'd love to hear from you. And also, we'll make sure we share this presentation after, you know, and post it. And so you'll have time to look it over again if you want to spend more time on the data that you saw and any of the present examples. Mr. Uli.
Good morning, everyone. I tend to agree with some of the comments that have already been made. In particular, it is an awful lot of information to absorb in a very short period of time. What I might suggest in that regard is that if somehow a PDF of the presentation can be sent a few days in advance so that we can read it and be familiar with it, so that the discussion can be more thorough.
Yeah.
That I think would be helpful. But I do agree with Richard and Cass in their comments. I think it's important. The effort we're undertaking is important to improve the process. But in doing so, we shouldn't marginalize the creativity of our design community and professions while giving the city the tools that it needs to move projects forward and not get stuck in a quagmire of this and that. I did appreciate the depth of the presentation material. I think it's helpful. It's, as I said, a little difficult to absorb it. It was interesting, the donut analysis. Never really thought of understanding a community in that way, but would also caution about the historic district EPV, that somehow it not get lost in the mix or absorbed into standardizing something that I don't think we want. So I'll stop there. I'm rambling a little bit. Struggling with it a little bit as well, but I appreciate the information.
Thanks. And I wanted to add it. Yeah, I do apologize you didn't get materials in advance, and that would normally be our goal. It was just a lot of information that Opticos had to put together, and we didn't have time this time, but we do intend to have, for our next meeting, have some materials for you to review in advance.
Rosie, Richard again. It's interesting, both Cass and Robert identified, as I agree, the specialness of the El Pueblo Viejo, and it would almost seem that if we're going to do objective design standards, that somehow that the Spanish style outside the El Pueblo Viejo, those standards be slightly different, more relaxed, or somehow less stringent than the special inside. So maybe there are two documents or two sections on the Spanish style, one for inside and one for outside. So just a thought. I saw that pattern.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely something we can think about moving forward.
Do we want to get to these questions? I don't know if we can answer these questions now. What were 4 questions that we had on the board? But
yeah, and I wanted to add, we did have questions going in that we wanted you to think about, and I understand it's a lot of information and hard to answer on the spot, but I don't recall if we said this at the beginning, but if you could, we'll post the PowerPoint and the questions, and I would love to take your written comments, or you can call me and talk. I was thinking by about December 3rd or so would be really great. And that way, Opticos wants to hear all this while they finalize the memo they've been talking about. So what we can do is send you out the questions again, after this meeting, and I'll put a little deadline in there. And I'd love your written or verbal, however you want to do it, after you've had some time to think about it.
Good. Okay.
Cass, did you want to add something?
Yeah, could you remind us again of what is our overall schedule, for this entire effort? What can you kind of break that down for us, sort of where we are, where we're going, how we want to finish? And I really appreciate, if we could have those questions and have a little time to think about it. I'd be happy to provide more, better than what I've been able to do this morning.
No, that's a great question. Tony, I don't know if you can pull up, but do you have that schedule by any chance as a PDF?
Not in the presentation. I have that slide with the work group meetings, but there isn't a slide with the schedule itself.
Okay. Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but maybe Tony, you can correct me as I go along. But we have the entire grant funded project goes until 2023. And I think we're trying to wrap up. So kind of moving backwards, we have to get something adopted by, I think it's spring 2023. Does that sound right? And so I think I have a schedule. Yeah, sorry, we want to wrap things up by about summer 2023 as far as public hearings and all. But moving into 2022, we hope to have at least 4 more work group meetings throughout 2022. We'd have draft design standards coming out. Do you remember, Tony, roughly when that was going to be? I think we're talking maybe.
It's muted. Yeah, we're looking at the, let's see, draft coming out in June of 2021.
You mean 2022?
Sorry, 2022.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we have, between now and early summer 2022 to have more work group meetings and start looking at admin drafts and really, Opticos has a lot to do between now and then. So does that help, Cass, to kind of give a bigger picture?
Yes. Yes, and yeah, I think these questions will be really important, and if we can maybe have, if I don't recall the questions right now, but I'll look there, and if we can have other comments, perhaps there could be a category for additional comments if we have any.
Of course.
Yes, and maybe understand that schedule. I'm just hoping, I'm a little concerned if we have enough meetings to be able to, effectively, be in sync with you, not that so that you don't have to go away and do a bunch of work and then come back and then, so that we can be connecting more frequently, working together in collaboration more to help you, so that the work will be more streamlined.
Correct.
As opposed to putting a lot together and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't thinking this at all, or, just to use an extreme example.
No, I understand that. And I know we originally, the work scope included 6 work group meetings, but I've always kept a sort of thought that if we have to schedule additional work group meetings, I think we have the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, so, and that they can be more casual, that we, can dialogue and collaborate so that we make it easier as a team.
Yeah.
Working together. Yeah.
And ideally, in person would be great too, but yeah, we'll see where that goes. Because I do realize too, when you're in person and you can sit around and, it's less formal and easier to collaborate, but we'll do what we can.
Okay. Yep. Well, we're here to help, and we need to. Obviously, we are the community, so we need to be directly connected. We can be most helpful that way. I feel that this is just my opinion, is that we have a very built out city, and we have very distinct, wonderful neighborhoods, and I think what we're trying to do is to preserve our, the character of our city, while also figuring out where do we have options, for increased development or housing, if you will.
Yeah.
How do we do that and preserve the city as we appreciate it and love it today? That's just my opinion.
Rosie, I have a question of interest that kind of dovetails in with Cass's question. I think I can't remember the exact wording of the first question that was up on the screen about distinct neighborhoods, was it, that we could identify?
Tony, can you put the questions back up again?
Patterns. Okay. prevalent patterns. I guess my question to Tony is, you've done several cities and so forth. When you did your walkabout and so forth, did you see our city as having a lot of special, different, and precise areas of different patterns? And you say, oh wow, this is going to be a interesting multi-leveled, sectioned design standards to preserve or to strengthen all of these various special places? Or do you say, oh, is it so mixed that it's going to be kind of a easy or generally applied style differences and more of a general structured document? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, no, thank you, Richard. Yeah, well, actually, it's the clearest is El Pueblo Viejo, right? All of that is the clearest. It's very strong in its physical character from a form standpoint, and very strong from a visual style standpoint as well. And then as you get into the neighborhoods, then it's mixed, as you saw on the tables that Eric was showing. There's something that might be more common, but there are other styles there. And so the other neighborhoods from a form standpoint, well, let me finish that thought. So from a visual or a style standpoint, the other neighborhoods are less pronounced in one particular style. Although there might be a prevalent style in there, they're not. It's not like, whoa, this is a totally craftsman area, with the exception of maybe the bungalow district, right?
As compared to other cities that you've studied.
Yeah. Some cities it's well, the other comparison, I guess, I should mention is that in comparison to other cities, Santa Barbara has a more consistent level of better buildings throughout all neighborhoods. That's really clear. And better.
But they're still mixed, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
right, yeah, that's right. They're mixed in form and mixed in style, right? But the consistency of the level, the higher level, from middle on up, is higher than in many cities. In many cities, you'll find a district that's like Santa Barbara, and then a lot of other kinds of neighborhoods. But in Santa Barbara, the level is higher across the board.
All right, thanks.
Okay, I think at this time, well, I'll invite other panelists if they want to say anything, maybe for the next couple of minutes, and then I should open it up in case any of our attendees want to make public comment, and then I can talk about our next meeting. So I'll invite, if another panelist wants to say anything at this point, go ahead and turn on your camera. I'm not seeing that happening. So I think we have a couple of people attending the meeting, and I'll see if anyone wants to make any general public comment. Doesn't look like any of our attendees want to say anything. Tony, I don't remember, do you have a slide about the next, sort of at the end of your presentation? So anyway, the last thing we'll do today is just talk about getting together again. And so what we're looking at as a date, oh, okay, there we go. Oh, okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to see. So you saw your existing conditions summary. That's all going to be put, as Tony mentioned, into a memo with some explanatory text, and we will be getting a draft of that memo as staff, and then get it finalized and get it out to you before the next meeting. And then the next meeting, we're also going to focus on sort of the framework approach to these design standards. And we're proposing to have this meeting on February 11th. It's another Friday, same time. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if any work group members know right now that they would or would not be able to attend that date, but I'll go ahead and send you a, set the date, time aside calendar appointment for that. By then we should be using Zoom. So I don't know if that's better than GoToMeeting, but we'll have a new software to run. Does anyone have any questions about the next meeting or the schedule that's outlined here? Okay, seeing none. So the follow-up to this meeting will be getting out the PowerPoint presentation to you, and the questions, I will also maybe put them in a Word doc and send them out to you with some opportunity to think more about this and get back to us. Cass, do you have something?
Yeah, that's all I was going to say. So you want us to respond to the questions by December 3rd?
Yes, that would be helpful, because that way, if there's something Opticos needs to change or reflect in the write-up that they're preparing, they'd like to know that by then. And of course, I'm open anytime. Just call me or email or whatever if you have more questions about the project itself or the entire process. Don't feel like you have to wait for a work group meeting or anything like that. One thing I was going to offer, if anyone's, there was a lot of information there about the zoning envelope and then what got approved. And if you have any questions about those particular projects, I could also research sort of how they went through the process and why they may have changed from one thing to another. But you can follow up with me if you're interested in digging a little more into these example projects.
Rosie,
Oh, yes.
Richard again. One of the things that occurred to me when I reviewed the walkabout and the buildings examined is that there's a lot of buildings in the pipeline that are very challenging in design and so forth. Especially the new multi-housing. I wondered if Opticos would appreciate seeing some of those as some of the challenges that we see, and just perhaps studying some of those. I don't know whether it would be easy to study them in the way they do, just because they're still on paper, but it occurred to me that a lot of those new things that we've have been challenged to approve are there and indeed ready to pull the trigger on construction, and could influence the way we think about the limits that we want to or the content of our standards.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I will point out, I believe we went, at least on the list, and some of the information we've given Opticos are on pending projects. And we might have even reviewed or driven by some sites where we told them, there's a project proposed on this site. But another great piece of homework for you is if there's any particular projects you're reviewing right now or close to getting finished, or that had a design review approval but haven't pulled their building permits yet, and you think they would be great examples, let me know, and I can get the building permit or design review approved project plans to Opticos to look at.
I can think of a couple, thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great follow-up. And it may be projects we already sent to them, but if it's not, that would be good to know. Okay, any other last thoughts, comments, questions from anyone in the audience? All right, seeing none, I think
I
we'll
want to
adjourn.
say thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Opticos. Yeah, thank you for the work. And it goes both ways. You can reach out to us as well. You know, we're here for this purpose.
Thank you for that. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And yeah, great seeing you all, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you all.
All right, bye.
Thank you.